next we're going to switch over to our New York panel, and we're going to see while we get Colin and Jeff to log in here. We've got Jeff Brown, the VP of Global Intelligence with Recorded Future, and we've got Colin Ahern, of Chief Cyber Officer of the State of New York. The topic is going to be, as it always is, going local with this cyber strategy. When we're talking New York, you know, they have their opinions on things, but they usually like to run the story as being the way it should be done, which in most cases they're ahead of us on a lot of things. So it's going to be a great conversation, and we're going to look forward to appreciating it. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff, and run with it from here. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. Can you hear me loud and clear, Colin?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. All right. It's an absolute pleasure to close things out with an exciting topic near and dear to both of our hearts and many others. But first, certainly a thank you to everyone who's been listening, as well as a thank you for the invitation to share a bit of perspective from the great state of New York today. I am welcoming Colin Ahern. A little bit of background on Colin. He is New York State's first Chief Cyber Officer, coming into that position in June of 2022. Before that, he was CISO, Chief Information Security Officer for the City of New York and the head of New York City Cyber Command, but that is not nearly the limits of his public service. So Colin was also a member of the U.S. Army. He enlisted right after 9/11 and served 2 full-year tours in Afghanistan. He was also a company commander for Army Cyber and has numerous decorations. Colin has somehow fit the time and in quite a busy professional career to get an MBA from NYU. He currently teaches at Columbia's prestigious School of International and Public Affairs. And very importantly, perhaps for our conversation today, something that's fun and quite relevant about Colin, he is sort of proudly a 4th generation New Yorker, which is quite significant, you know, and I think to a certain extent, you know, it shows that despite Colin's, you know, significant national service, he's devoting his talent, his significant talent, to the people that his family itself has been shoulder to shoulder with for generations, and that's the people of New York. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Colin to this afternoon session. Colin, I thought maybe you would start us off by talking to us a little bit about what New York State is, but through a digital lens. So help us frame the conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. And firstly, it's great to see so many familiar names. You know, Lieutenant General retired Fogarty and Admiral Montgomery. So many. You know, I met some shaking fists in previous lives, especially General Fogarty. But thank you so much to the Cipher team for having us. It's a real pleasure. And New York's a big deal, obviously. It's not only the center of global commerce and financial services, it's also a big state. It kind of has not only the largest metro area in the United States and in North America with New York, but it also has several really important facilities from a defense, industrial, and national security perspective. Just to touch on a couple, obviously we have the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum in upstate. We have Micron building a $100 billion semiconductor fabrication facility outside of Syracuse. We have Global Foundries, which has a significant presence here. We have Lockheed Martin, which has a facility along with GE Aerospace and others in Liverpool, New York, and on Long Island. Lockheed obviously just received the W-48 Mark 7 torpedo contract, America's most lethal subwater munition. And there's obviously the Air Force Research Laboratory, which has cutting edge research on a number of things. The president, who is in town today for the United Nations General Assembly, was actually here in October about a year ago, inaugurating a $20 billion facility to do quantum, semiconductor, and artificial intelligence research with IBM outside of Poughkeepsie. So New York's got a place in not only the cutting edge research for obviously cyber and AI and other things, but also, cyber adjacent semiconductors, the defense industrial base and other places. New York's government is also significant. There are over 70 executive agencies and authorities. The state has done under the governorship, the leadership of Governor Kathy Hochul, an enormous amount to make us more unified and more resilient. She thinks and we believe that resilience is absolutely the key, not only focusing on preventive controls, but on assuming that a bad day will occur. And so a whole of government strategy where we work closely with our federal partners, as well as, our neighboring states. For example, Cyber Protection Team 73 is one of the few cyber protection teams in the National Guard. We share that with New Jersey, and other things. And I could obviously go on and on. But New York's a big place. We're doing very cool things in cyber. And New York's enormously important, not just for the things you typically think about, but also, for example, the Watervliet Arsenal outside of Albany is where they're manufacturing, most of the gun barrels that they're actually sending to Europe. So it's an enormous place and enormously important things from a national security perspective.
So to maybe use a phrase you just had, I think it's a terrific phrase to think about. Resilience is absolutely the key. When it comes down to it, what you've just explained says, at least to me and maybe everybody else in the audience, that it counts that New York State is resilient in the digital space because of all of the things that you enumerated. Tell us about how you're doing it. Tell us a little bit about your office itself.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the first Chief Cyber Officer. I've had the privilege of being here for about a year. And so I'm the principal cyber advisor to the governor. And obviously she has responsibilities, not just in operating her network securely and resiliently, but providing services, regulating industries, communicating advice and guidance, and on and on. And so we operate across all of the agencies. I work directly with the members of the governor's senior staff, with agency heads throughout the state, as well as elected officials, the members of our elected delegation, with our federal partners and others. And really it's to, make us more unified, increasing access to cybersecurity tools, increasing the connectivity, the meaningful operational collaboration, the value-added information sharing, not just with our federal partners, primarily through our statutorily enabled New York State Intelligence Center, but other avenues like the Governor's Joint Security Operations Center, other things of that nature. More resilient, not just in the operation of the networks that she manages. For example, we basically trebled the budget for the Office of Information Technology Services, the Governor's primary technology services provider, their dedicated cyber budget since she took office in 2021. But we added $500 million in a capital grant program for the healthcare industry because we've seen the very concerning uptick in ransomware attacks against healthcare facilities. Passing legislation, we're the only state that can prescriptively regulate energy distribution for cybersecurity. In December of last year, the governor signed a bill giving our Public Service Commission the authority to regulate cyber, just like they regulate storm response plans. And actually, in April of this year, we enacted the final rulemaking based on that legislation. Additionally, we're doing a very significant focus on operational technology. So we're building what we believe is the first statewide industrial control system focused cyber assessment team at our Department of Homeland Security. So we're focusing on those things across the state. And, we do think that we're on the clock. We really feel, the governor feels, that the threats grow more significant every day. The situation across the world, as we heard from our other panelists, the situation grows more concerning, not less. So I think moving with a sense of urgency against this problem is very much our direction, and that's what we're executing on.
And the sense of urgency is something that actually I think is an incredible tie-in to what we spoke about within the Cipher Brief group earlier in today's session when Sue Gordon opened up talking about the National Cybersecurity Strategy Implementation Plan. And I think to a certain extent, it would be very interesting for the audience to see through New York State's lens, the unique lens that you have, the tie-in between what you've just spoke about, parts of that New York State implementation, it's New York State cybersecurity strategy itself, and how that ties to sort of the success or the independence of the state from what the federal government is planning to do with urgency, we hope, in the implementation plan that they have. So go ahead with that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of threads to pull. One is, I think that there is a significant focus for us. Obviously, in just about a month ago, the governor released the state's first cybersecurity strategy, which we think is a powerful document. We actually, acting principal deputy national cyber director, was able to join us for that event. And so we worked very closely with acting director Walden, with Rob Kanaki before he left, and others on making sure that we were nested appropriately within the federal strategy. So enhancing our security operations capabilities, both our detective controls, our preventive controls, and really our ability to pass the information across the interagency, kind of north to the federal government, so we can go kind of up through the appropriate channels there. But just as importantly, to state agencies, to the municipalities, to county and local governments. We have some other advantages in New York. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center is in the same building as the New York State Intelligence Center in East Greenbush, New York. So the connectivity between our New York State Intelligence Center and the MS-ISAC is very close and goes back many, many years. So that's a significant capability that we leverage. We're also assessing and tracking risk at state agencies. Obviously, a variety of tools and processes are in place, and we want to not only continue. This is about services to residents, visitors, and businesses. And if it's not secure, it can't be considered reliable. And if it's not reliable, it can't be considered secure. And there is a significant challenge with legacy, with technical debt, with the evolution of business processes, and moreover, our residents' expectations because of the incredible pace of technology and its growth in particular, the last 20 years probably. So trying to modernize, the tools that we're able to use in government with the procurement processes to support them. And obviously that includes things like zero trust, so a significant focus on zero trust. And for example, post-quantum, we do mention that in the strategy, and that really starts with asset management. Where's your key material? Who's got it? Who's using it? What's its life cycle? So that starts with, routine things routinely, like asset management. And obviously, we're a nation of laws, so issuing updated cybersecurity policies. We've had a big focus on cybersecurity policies and making sure that those policies support the governor's vision for a unified, resilient, and prepared state, and enable, in particular, our key agencies like Homeland Security, like ITS, like the state police, like the Public Service Commission and others to do the great work that the people of New York have given them the capability to do.
So one of the big hallmarks, I think, Colin, of what you've been able to deliver in these capacities is you're never afraid of emerging technology. A lot of times, unfortunately, people look at government and they say, well, government will get along. They'll get there someday, right? But government is slow, bureaucratic, and it's difficult to get things done. But you're a testament in the exact opposite direction. When it comes down to it, you're not afraid of emerging technology. You're not afraid to deploy it. You're not afraid in any way, shape, or form to succeed because it's necessary to create the right type of resilient structures we need to deliver services. So tell us a little bit about how you're seeing emerging technology in New York State. Where would you like to take things, say, for instance, in the next 5 years plus?
Yeah, I think it's really about leveraging a couple of things. One, it's about not being afraid of starting something that is going to take a while. Obviously, one of my favorite anecdotes is when, Napoleon was going to invade Egypt. He turned to his second and he said, obviously there's other historical things with colonialism and other issues there, but he said to his second, I want to invade Egypt. And his second said something to the effect of, sir, just to build the boats will take 18 months. And he said, well, we better get started today then. So I think that, these are multi-year journeys, in particular with, say, building a statewide picture of cyber threats, with building a data environment that can reliably, securely, and comprehensively take in information across the state, critical infrastructure, appropriately coordinated with the federal government. These are significant journeys, and they're certainly not done. And, but we're not afraid to start them. So I think that's a big thing. Obviously, we're very closely monitoring artificial intelligence. I think the furor, the kind of the agita and the interest across the spectrum in artificial intelligence is very real, but we want to be, cautious about AI and cyber snake oil. And so we need to kind of focus on the basics, like we said, routine things routinely. It has to be operationally relevant. It has to actually provide a net incremental value. It has to be technically feasible. There's no magic, right? AI, cyber, quantum, these things, you have to get back to physics. And they have to be sustainable. They have to be sustainable for the organization. They have to be politically, practically, and culturally sustainable. And so really that's why the government, I think, is unique in that it doesn't exit businesses. The government isn't dabbling in services to residents. The governor's not seeing if this new app we're going to do, is going to be the next big thing. We're providing unemployment insurance. We're providing public safety. We're providing, education. So the way that the government can buy, procure, maintain, operate, and leverage things, I think, obviously, it is in many ways different from the private sector, but it can be just as powerful. And the governor, as she takes a long-term view about building capability, and so that's exciting, I think, to be a part of.
So, like, listening to all that, if you say, for instance, you were speaking to another state or another public sector entity, when it comes down to it, many look towards New York State for leadership. It's the Empire State, I suppose. So what does that conversation look like if you were able to use this broadcast medium to say, hey, if I were in your shoes, these are the first 3 things that I would try and address? Of course, being technology agnostic, what did you say in those conversations?
I think it depends on your level of abstraction, or depends on where you're situated. So where, I'm in the governor's office, so from, I think, kind of from starting from maybe top and going down, have a strategy. This was the first strategy that the state has ever written in cybersecurity. So you have to start with a strategy. And the governor had, played a very significant role in the formation of our strategic pillars, in the selection of, what to focus on. For example, a big focus on growing our workforce and our economy, a big focus on communicating advice and guidance about, appropriately regulating critical industries, obviously signing the legislation to give, to regulate energy distributors. So I think, if you're an elected official, you're a CEO, don't assume that people know what you want. So write it down. Serious people write things down, and this is serious business. So I think take the time. Our strategy is 15 or so pages, and I think it's a powerful document that really lays out the governor's vision. And then allow people to surprise you with their ingenuity. We have an incredible cadre of civil servants. Civil service is a pleasure, but people, I think, they want to be inspired. I think the governor's vision on cybersecurity is inspiring. So I think that you can retain, you can enhance a civil service team of teams with, strategic vendor partners from the great private sector community we have here in New York and other places, to the civil service, to our nonprofits, to research institutions. So I think that it starts with a vision, and then, once you lay down the gauntlet, hold people to account. We mentioned the metrics, we mentioned, an increased focus on risk management, and then the basics, routine things. Great organizations do routine things routinely. So if you want to do something extraordinary, it starts with, the basics. So, multi-factor, all the usual stuff, multi-factor authentication, knowing your internet-facing threat surface and patching it or triaging it appropriately, having a team of dedicated staff that can work problems, having the right relationships and contractual vehicles with your vendor partners, incident response teams, etc. There's no secret, there's only hard work. But I do think that that's some of the ways that I think the governor's led in this area. And if I were to, talk to another state or members of another country, it's, don't assume that there is some magical solution here. I think it's all those things.
So I love this phrase you use, let people surprise you with their ingenuity. Let people surprise you with their ingenuity. I'm going to absolutely remember that. I think it's a great and motivating, almost a challenge of a phrase, right? So maybe, if I was to challenge you to kind of think outside the box, you know, what seemingly unattainable would you think about, would you want? It could be governance, it could be policy, it could be technology that you would think might make all the difference for the New Yorkers that you serve.
I think it's holding a couple of things come to mind. Number one is, I think unfortunately, people don't have a good enough imagination when it comes to how bad things could get. So I think that
That's a sobering statement,
among
Cal.
our policymakers, and maybe I don't want to say in particular the private sector, but people, I think, you know, the magical thinking, you know, we want to not be alarmist, right? But we want to be clear-eyed in our assessment of the trajectory of this space, our reliance on cyber, and, you know, in particular with, you know, a great discussion, a couple, you know, of the previous panel about, you know, having a process for determining materiality. You know, yeah, so I think I think a good imagination for how bad things could get, and execute on, you know, timely, critical plans to assess how you're going to know that you're crossing into the danger zone, and how you can begin to, you know, ameliorate or mitigate. So don't, you know, if we're just left hoping things are going to work out, it's probably too late. So I think perhaps a better imagination for some of those things. Some things that I think, you know, unity, I think, you know, because this is a whole of society problem. And I think the divisiveness that unfortunately we see, I think that cyber is one of the few bipartisan issues that remains in America today. And I think that the more that continues to be the case, the better for the United States, for, you know, for our values, for our society it'll be. But I do think that the division across the country is concerning. Yeah, so I think those couple things. Small.
So I think that's that's absolutely a great sort of thought, and perhaps, you know, especially considering the audience today, you know, this notion maybe we should protect, you know, tooth and nail that cybersecurity is not a partisan issue. That could be something to commit to protect that. And I think it's incredibly important. It's often thought, whether it be in cybersecurity or intelligence or other security disciplines, law enforcement, that it's best, you know, like if, you know, the individual citizen doesn't even know you're there. You know, I mean, if they know you're there, that means they need you or something's happened, etc. But sometimes I think that does people of great public service like yourself a disservice. Sometimes it's nice for people to know you're there. If you were to sort of have a conversation with a New Yorker about what your office does and about the efforts that the people you lead put in each and every day, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, I think there's three different ways. I think of three things. There's, you know, a few, many, all. I think a few of us are called to serve, have the honor of being public servants, of working on these problems. State police troopers in the New York Intelligence Center, the members of the Civil Service Cadre, you know, on operations right now in the Security Operations Center, the members in the CERT. Many of us, you know, are fortunate to support them as policymakers, in my case, as decision makers at agencies, as other places. But I think everyone has a role to play in cybersecurity, in particular by being prepared, by, you know, realizing that these systems are systems maintained by people, operated by people that are imperfect. And so enabling New Yorkers to take charge of their own cybersecurity. Over the next several years, the State Education Department is going to be phasing in we think nation-leading computer science curriculum, of which cybersecurity is going to be one of the 5 major pillars. So, you know, we're starting, you know, K through 12, cybersecurity, computer education. It's called Computer Science for All. So actually, you know, starting next year, kindergartners are going to be learning about cybersecurity. But not only that, we have 4 cybersecurity centers, you know, DoD centers of cybersecurity excellence in our community colleges across the state. Mohawk Valley Community College, other places. And this is a scale problem. You know, we need absolutely stellar master's degree students and PhD students, but we also need a cybersecurity civil service cadre of people with skills, whether or not they have degrees. And we need, you know, kindergartners, you know, all the way up to 12th grade to have a basic STEM enabled computer science education that appropriately integrates cybersecurity in the core disciplines of, you know, think before you click, understanding, you know, what internet surveillance is and how to avoid it, key privacy practices and other things. And so our job is to make it so that New Yorkers can live lives online that are free of harassment, that enable them to present themselves, to take advantage of the incredible fruits of our labors together that have made the internet an incredibly dynamic, challenging, frustrating, amazing place. You know, so I think that's a part of it. But also, you know, this is, you know, unfortunately, the bad guys are real. This is not imaginary stuff. So this is serious, and there could be a day where unfortunately bad things happen. You know, this is a public safety business. This is, you know, this is, I think, in the same category of counterintelligence and counterterrorism, where we work every day to reduce the frequency, magnitude, and duration of these kinds of events. And when unfortunately they do occur, we rapidly recover from them, we learn what we can, and we move forward.
So maybe the balance point to your earlier statement that it's hard to imagine how bad things could get is this notion that you've put forward, you know, few, many, all. It's sort of reminiscent of a statement often made, paraphrased by another great cybersecurity leader, to beat one of us, you'll have to beat all of us. So with that terrific refrain, thank you, Colin, very much for your time today. Continued success in defending New Yorkers and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, and we can either succeed together or we can fail separately. There's no middle ground. Yep. And thanks, Suzanne, for having us. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'm so glad to see you in New York putting a lot of these things we've been talking about for years into action. I'm probably most excited about the education system and how you're approaching cybersecurity from, you know, the age of like kindergartners. But start with a strategy is my one takeaway from this, and so many great things. And thank you both, Jeff. Thank you for a masterful conversation here. There was a lot to dig into, so I appreciate both your time today.